Welcome to the 2026-27 Alveary book videos for grades 1 to 3. I'm Carrie Forney, Executive Director of Charlotte Mason Institute and a former homeschool mom of 5 adult children. If you're new here, we're so glad that you have found us. I want to take just a few moments to introduce you to Alveary and the Charlotte Mason Institute, the nonprofit behind the Alveary Curriculum. The Charlotte Mason Institute, or CMI, began over 20 years ago as a gathering of educators passionate about Charlotte Mason's educational philosophy and practices. That annual conference is still going and is a highlight of our year, and we'd love to have you join us. From those early conversations, the Alveary Curriculum was born over a decade ago. We saw the need, educators like you needing a helping hand in implementing a Charlotte Mason education through lesson plans that support you when you're pulled in so many different directions and help you implement Mason's methods as you teach your students. We've grown significantly since those early years. CMI now offers various publications, training courses, certificate and graduate level for home and classroom educators as well as school leaders, support for co-ops, and accreditation for Charlotte Mason schools of all sizes. Our Alveary curriculum is designed for and widely used in both homeschool and classroom settings, whether that classroom is your local Charlotte Mason co-op or one of the growing number of Charlotte Mason schools across the country. The curriculum and resources are written by a collaborative team that ensures quality and cohesiveness across subjects and grades. You'll meet a few of those team members in this video, but you can see our whole team on CMI's website. Now let me show you one of the things that makes Alveary unique, our lesson plans. These lesson plans work alongside the books you're reading with your students. They're not just a list of assignments, they guide you through Charlotte Mason's methods with clear, practical steps for each lesson. Alveary Plus members also enjoy even easier planning with Syllabird, an online planner which has all your lessons loaded and ready to customize. This is what sets us apart: rich, living books combined with thoughtful lesson plans that do the heavy lifting for you. As a member, you'll also enjoy a private online community of fellow Alveary members where you can ask questions and gather inspiration. While we do offer most of our subjects individually in our store, membership is our best value. For $2.99, a family membership gives you access to every lesson plan for every grade, all the subjects, 1st through 12th grade. This is especially helpful if you want to move a child up or down a grade in different subjects, combine students across grades, or switch to a different grade's lesson plans if your child has already read a particular book. Everything is at your fingertips. Now to the books. We won't have time, obviously, to cover every book and subject included in Alveary this year. The video would be way too long. But we'll be highlighting several books that represent the depth and breadth of what we offer. Keep in mind, these are just a few examples from a much larger book list. Beyond books, Alveary brings in website links, PDFs, our own exclusive member resources, and much more to create a complete learning experience. For a full list of subjects and resources, you can visit the Alveary sample page on our website. So how do we choose our books? We don't always go for the most challenging language or highest Lexile level. Instead, we ask, what makes this the best book for this subject and these students? We consider different genres, diverse perspectives, and books that will truly engage young minds and hearts. Our goal is a relational education, one that fosters students' relationships with God, humanity, and the universe through books, art, music, nature, and more. If you're curious about Alveary, we invite you to explore before you commit. On our website at alveary.org, you'll find free samples of our lesson plans and a free term of lessons to try. We want you to experience Alveary firsthand and see if it's the right fit for your family or classroom. For a more personal opportunity, we'd love to invite you to one of our open houses. It's a wonderful time to ask questions, to meet other educators, and learn more about how Alveary can support your teaching journey. You can sign up for an open house through the link on our website. We look forward to meeting you soon at an open house, or maybe on one of our member Zoom calls, or on our private social media platform. We're here to support you every step of the way. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, I'm Shannon Whiteside, Alveary Program Director, and I'm here with some of our collaborative members, Meredith Donaldson-Clark and Danielle Merritt-Sinceri. We will be talking about grades 1 through 3 in this video. Formal lessons in a Charlotte Mason education don't begin until age 6. In these early grades, students will learn foundational skills such as reading and handwriting, while also being immersed in living ideas through books, music, art, and nature. Much of their time is spent orally narrating their books, which lays a strong foundation for future composition. Rather than rushing children into formal writing, these years allow them the space to absorb great stories, literary language, and inspiring characters. A wide feast is spread before students so they can begin the relationship with all areas of knowledge. We don't want to limit their exposure to all subject areas based on our own preferences or a child's interest. A Charlotte Mason education falls into 3 domains of knowledge: knowledge of God, knowledge of humanity, and knowledge of the universe. The goal is not to accumulate knowledge, but to build relationships with all these areas of learning. As educators, we can't force a relationship, but we can help to cultivate these relationships as we introduce students to these areas and allow them to do the work of processing what they are reading through narration. As we choose books and create lesson plans, we are keeping this idea of relationship in mind. Let's start by talking about the knowledge of God. Charlotte Mason said, of the 3 sorts of knowledge proper to a child, the knowledge of God, of man, and of the universe, the knowledge of God ranks first in importance, is indispensable, and most happy-making. She didn't want Bible lessons to be moralistic and children to feel like the Bible is a list of do's and don'ts, but she wanted each Bible lesson to give new thoughts of God, new hopes of heaven. When students are young, we want them to come to know God through His stories. Therefore, grades 1 through 6 read through selections of the Old Testament narratives in the Gospels. Our first graders begin with Hurlbut's Story of the Bible. This wonderful story Bible closely adheres to Scripture without embellishment or opinion. It sets a great foundation for understanding the overall arc of the Bible. If you want to read the passages straight from the Bible, the verses are also provided in our lesson plans. Second graders will read through the Old Testament and New Testament narrative selections. The stories they read in first grade in the Story Bible will now be read straight from the Bible. We use the Bible timeline as a resource for students to review the stories they heard and visualize the chronological order. We also use an excellent resource for educators called the Bible Story Handbook by John and Kim Walton. Sometimes it's hard to know what the main idea of a narrative is. This book helps us to understand the biblical context, interpretational issues, and mistakes to avoid when reading specific Bible passages. This should be read beforehand as a way to prepare for the lessons, but you will want to use parts of it as you see fit to provide an introduction to a passage or a point of discussion after the reading. 3rd through 6th graders share the same Bible lessons. They will read through selections from the books of Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel. For New Testament, they are studying the book of John. A helpful book used in both Old Testament and New Testament lessons is titled The New Manners and Customs of Bible Time. Through illustrations, photos, and clear explanations, the author shows us what life was like in Bible times so Scripture can come more alive as students imagine living in that time and place. We will assign certain sections before or after Bible readings that will help students understand the context of the passage and get more insight into the culture and geography of Israel. Our Bible lessons will also include readings about men and women from church history from the historical time period we are studying. For the 2026-2027 school year, we are studying the time period of 1800 to 1900. First through third graders will be reading two different biographies. One of these biographies is a book called The Bandit of Ashley Downs, which tells about George Mueller, the man of prayer and great faith who saved many children by opening an orphanage in Bristol, England. I'm sure the students will find it fascinating.
Within the knowledge of humanity, our first graders always study pre-Columbian history, the history of the people who were already here before the United States became a country in 1776. We begin the year reading The Very First Americans, which introduces various Native American tribes, and then we get into a little more depth with books about specific tribes. The book Hiawatha and the Peacemaker is a lovely retelling of a traditional Iroquois story about how peace and unity were brought to 5 warring tribes. Another book they will read is Moonstick by Eve Bunting. In a somewhat poetic manner, the author tells about the Sioux boy coming of age as each year is marked on his father's moon counting stick. The illustrations and the text do a good job of capturing the tribe's way of life. Frozen Lands tells about the traditional life of an Inuit family in the Canadian Arctic. The wonderful photographs help students understand the way the people navigate life in their harsh, frozen environment and how these traditional ways of life are changing.
The Alveary also offers a history stream for Canadian families. In grade 1, students spend the year learning about Canada's vibrant and diverse Indigenous history. One guide that is used throughout the year is the Honour Drum, sharing the beauty of Canada's Indigenous people with children, families, and classrooms. Written as a partnership between two friends, an Indigenous woman and a non-Indigenous man, this book introduces children to the history, stories, traditions, and symbols that have been meaningful to Indigenous people from the distant past right up until today. The topics in this book are paired with a variety of picture books. Some, like Hiawatha and the Peacemaker and Maple Moon, introduce students to Indigenous ways of life from long ago, while others, including David Robertson's beautiful award-winning book On the Trapline, celebrates how Indigenous cultures and traditional practices continue to thrive today. Throughout the year, students read poems for each lunar month, from 13 Moons on Turtle's Back, a Native American Year of Moons by Joseph Bruback and Jonathan London.
In the Alveary, there's a 4-year rotation for history. We have 3 strands of history: American and Canadian, World, and Ancient, with World added in 4th and Ancient added in 5th grade. Everyone from 2nd grade up is in the same time period. Next year, we are in our 3rd rotation, which is 1800 to 1900 AD. The 2nd and 3rd graders will only be studying U.S. and Canadian history, but they will be exposed to other people and events outside of the U.S. through composer study, picture study, missionary biographies, handicrafts, and other subjects. In fact, one of the books 3rd graders will read as part of literature is the historical fiction novel Heart of a Samurai. It is based on the true story of a 14-year-old Japanese boy who survived a shipwreck and was rescued by an American whaling ship. He comes to America to live for a while before heading back to Japan, where his knowledge of the West is an asset to his government. The 19th century was a tumultuous time for our country because of slavery and the Civil War. Escape into the Night is an historical fiction book that does a great job of introducing slavery and the Civil War to younger students. The main character, Tommy, who lives in the South, meets a wounded Union soldier, which brings the realities of opposing sides in the war into personal perspective. Tommy also questions the institution of slavery and his own views on justice and humanity. Another interesting aspect of the book is that the wounded soldier has a commonplace book and shares quotes with Tommy. Along with historical fiction, biography is a great way to learn about a time period. Mason says, "Let him, on the contrary, linger pleasantly over the history of a single man, a short period, until he thinks the thoughts of that man are at home in the ways of that period. Though he is reading and thinking of the lifetime of a single man, he is really getting intimately acquainted with the history of a whole nation for a whole age. Abraham Lincoln, an initial biography by Genevieve Foster, presents the life of Lincoln through an engaging narrative that starts with his humble beginnings and takes the reader through his political rise, his presidency during the Civil War, and his assassination and legacy. We are glad to see that this book has been reprinted. We also want students to get a feeling for what life was like for the people who lived in the 1800s. Depending on who you were, life was very different. Dandelions by Eve Bunting is a lovely longer-length picture book about Western expansion as seen through the eyes of a young girl named Zoe, who leaves her home with her family to seek land and opportunity on the prairie of the Nebraska Territory. Buffalo Bird Girl by S.D. Nelson lets students walk in the shoes of a Native American girl. This book is based on the real childhood experiences of a Hidatsa woman born around 1839 who lived along the Missouri River on the Great Plains. Students are introduced to the tribe's customs and daily routines, the relationships with other tribes, and their initial interactions with the white man. The story also tells how the Hidatsa way of life was changed forever when they were forced to relocate to a reservation. The experience of Chinese immigrants is captured in the book Coolies. During the mid-1800s, thousands of Chinese workers came to America to build the Transcontinental Railroad. This book, which was inspired by actual events, reveals the hardships, discrimination, and perseverance of these workers. We hope that these books will help young readers begin to develop an understanding of history as many interesting stories of lots of people with different experiences and perspectives. Only God knows all the stories, but even in these early grades, we want students to begin to understand that history is complicated and people have lived in times and places very different from our own.
Canadian students in grades 2, 3, and 4 learn together about 19th century Canadian history through the Kids' Book of Canadian History, which has helpful maps, engaging illustrations, and a narrative that keeps the formative time in our nation's history straightforward enough even for the youngest historians. The other selections students read this year aim to kindle and shape their historical imagination. From the Spirit of Canada, students learn stories, songs, and poems about the many significant historical events of the 19th century. Other books present historical events through the experiences of individuals. The War of 1812 is seen through the eyes of Laura Secord in Laura Secord's Brave Walk. Canada's Confederation through the curiosity of children living in Charlottetown, in the book Born, A Fool, 5 Kittens, and Confederation. And the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway through the struggles and discrimination faced by a Chinese railway worker in the picture book I Am Not a Ghost.
Let's take a look at geography. For first grade, we use selections from Mason's Elementary Geography to provide students a foundation in concepts such as what makes day and night, the water cycle, and understanding a globe. We have several shorter books as well that explain concepts in more depth using pictures to aid comprehension. One example is The Reason for the Seasons, which provides simple explanations and great illustrations. We also incorporate map work into the lessons, beginning with a child's room or classroom, home or school, and then their yard or playground. They also begin first by creating models before they move on to drawing maps. In second and third grade, we'll continue reading the book Cross Country, a great book to discuss geography concepts as we follow a family on a road trip from California to Washington, D.C. To supplement the reading, we'll use this book, 50 Adventures in 50 States, as a way to have a visual for different states. We like it a lot because it shows what activities you can do in each state based on the geographical features, such as mountains, lakes, forests, or deserts. We've also incorporated some other books into the lessons as we talk about those regions. One of those books, read in third grade, is Grandma Gatewood Hikes the Appalachian Trail. This book tells the true story of a 67-year-old grandma who was the first woman to solo hike the Appalachian Trail. There are great maps to follow her journey as students explore that part of the country.
Grade 2 and 3 Canadian students also use the same selections from Mason's elementary geography as in the U.S. curriculum, but will explore our country using My Canada, an engaging illustrated atlas of each province and territory. As your students travel from sea to sea to sea, they will explore each region with help from the Kids Book of Canada, which provides a detailed look at each province and territory, including their geographical features, symbols, and significant people, places, and events. Along the way, students will practice their mapping skills and learn about foundational geographical concepts. Finally, in the book Canada Wild, students discover 12 special animals who can only be found here in Canada and have a lot to teach us about the varied ecosystems that make up our country. These books are used in grade 2 to study half of Canada's provinces and territories, and again, the rest of the country is completed in grade 3. Lesson plans are full of additional resources and activities, and students will also dig deeper into the geography of their own local areas. Let's now turn to look at English and literature. We have developed our own Alveary reading curriculum for grades 1 through 3 that incorporates copywork, dictation, and more. Alveary reading lessons are based around the Free and Treadwell Reading Literature series and are created by experts on our own team who know both Charlotte Mason and the modern science on reading. Following Mason, we believe that children should be taught from the beginning with real literature. We worked through Aesop's fables and other classic tales in the Free and Treadwell readers and identified the succession of phonics instruction, spelling patterns, vocabulary, age-appropriate grammar, and fluency development, so that everything is learned in context. In literature lessons, students build vocabulary, learn how to narrate, and stretch their imagination as they listen to books aloud and start reading books on their own. Students read books like Tales from Grimm by Wanda Gog, which is a nice rendition of Grimm with simple, beautiful language so students can practice their reading skills. And then they read a variety of tales and fables from around the world. Depending on their location and interests, students can choose between American tall tales and The Spirit of Canada. Then grade 2 and 3 read famous Greek myths in A Wonder Book by Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote during this year's time period, as well as foundational English works like Pilgrim's Progress, and we foster independence and a love of reading with Charlotte's Web in grade 3 to prepare them for grades 4 through 6 when they start reading more of their school books themselves. While poetry in grades 1 through 3 isn't always connected to the time period, many 19th century authors wrote poems suitable for or even written for children. So while the main focus in these grades is simply fostering a delight in language and the pleasure of beautiful ideas in poetry, this year students are using an anthology of 19th century children's poetry as the main source of their daily poetry reading. Each term also introduces a poet or poem in more depth, and this year Rabindranath Tagore, sometimes called the Robert Louis Stevenson of India, Effie Lee Newsom, and Emma Lazarus will become new friends. Simple lesson plans occasionally suggest ways to enjoy the poems more deeply by pointing out a poetic feature, offering an illustration or question, and sometimes suggesting activities which enhance the poems.
In handicrafts for the 26-27 school year, we're focusing on beauty for beauty's sake. The industrialization that lasted through the early 1900s was a time of mass producing and standardizing goods, and originality took a back seat. This gave birth to the arts and crafts movement in the late 1800s. People began focusing on beauty for the sake of beauty and making everyday objects beautiful once again. Our handicrafts will reflect this shift in history. We'll learn how to do sashiko work as they did in Japan and red work as was done in the United States and Europe. These are hand stitching techniques that incorporate different stitches to create beautiful patterns. Sashiko traditionally features white cotton thread on indigo dyed fabric, and red work uses red thread on white or light-colored fabric. Students will also learn the art of cloisonne that regained popularity in the West during that time. Cloisonne is an enameling technique that uses metal strips to create delicate designs. We think our students will have fun bending their wire pieces into a pattern or picture and then filling in their design with the colored sand mixture. We follow Mason's model and do clay modeling every year for one term. We're revamping our clay modeling program. You'll see a shift towards focusing on one hand-building technique per year for younger and inexperienced students, and more connections across the curriculum and observation and narration assignments. Students will be encouraged to apply their skills in other subjects to boost learning and understanding. For example, creating architectural replicas in architecture, or creating characters in literature, or 3D models for nature study. Our lesson plans provide the training videos needed.
Music and picture study provide another way for students to experience the time period. We will study the art of Vincent van Gogh, a Dutch post-impressionist painter who painted anything and everything he saw at a fever pitch. He left behind 850 paintings and over 1,300 works on paper. Edward Mitchell Bannister was a Canadian-American oil painter of the American Barbizon School. He painted simple landscapes directly from observation. And Lilias Trotter, who wasn't really classified into a particular style, but tended to render watercolor and sketching in a realist way to accurately reflect what she observed around her as a missionary in North Africa. Students will study music, such as Gilbert and Sullivan's comic operas, and we even have our classic hymn choices coordinate with the time, so famous carols like Angels We Have Heard on High, published in the mid-19th century, become a way of connecting with Christians from the past. We love the way that all these different subjects work together to nourish children's imagination and give them an acoustic, visual, and hands-on experience of the times as well.
Let's wrap up our knowledge of the universe with science. In grades 1 through 3, we have the students doing quite a bit of hands-on work during their lesson time as they begin with the idea of habitat, zoom out to biome, and then zoom out even further to dip their toes into the concept of ecosystem. You'll notice object lessons and a few projects woven into your lesson plans, like this one where our first graders are hunting for and observing ants, or this one where our third graders are dissecting owl pellets. You'll also find tips, reminders, and lots of additional resources in those lesson plans too. We use a number of picture books to support all of this work, like Over and Under the Pond in grade 1, or A Walk in the Deciduous Forest in grade 2. We also include books that bring attention to a particular creature, like Bat Loves the Night in grade 1 and Monarch and Milkweed in grade 2. In grade 3, we increase the reading a bit with Buzztail and Leaper, which gives us a great opportunity to see life cycles, food chains, and even the water cycle in action. Alongside these general science lessons, Alveary students are also reading from their nature reader. Now, I know that this book doesn't look like much, but that's because I get to share some really exciting news with you today. We are in the process of publishing an all-new Living Nature Reader for you. The stories in our Living Nature Reader have been expertly written by an experienced naturalist and museum educator, and I am thrilled to get to share them with you. They will delight little ones and adults alike, and will definitely help you get your nature eyes on and your brains curious. So get your nature journals ready because these new nature readers are coming out soon for our first and second graders. And if your kids are already past first and second grade, you'll still want them just for enjoyment and to support your outdoor adventures. Our third graders will be reading from Book 4 of the Christian Liberty Nature Reader, which is a lovely text that covers a variety of creatures, from bumblebees and ladybugs to birds and reptiles. And notice that your lessons include all sorts of supplemental links to help your students engage in whatever way works best for them.
As we said at the beginning of the video, if you have questions or just want to connect, feel free to DM us on social media or send us an email. We're here to support you every step of the way. Thank you for taking the time to learn about Alveary. We're excited about the year ahead and hope you'll join us in awakening children to delightful living.